Welcome. This is Mrs. Schlarman, and today we're going to talk about how to create a vase, a clay vase, a ceramic vase. And we're kind of looking at Greek and Roman pottery at this time in art history, 7th grade. This one you can see has already been finished and glazed. So the first thing we need to do is come up with our pattern. Symmetry is amazing because it allows you to create even shapes by just drawing one half. So what I'm going to do is come up with a design of my vase, the shape of it, and I'm going to draw just the side of it. So here I have one design. Then I would use my scissors and I would cut that out real quick, and you can see when I open it up. Next, I'm going to come in here and come up with a design for it. So traditionally in Greek and Roman, they used a lot of mythology, but they also used a lot of geometric shapes and patterns as well. So I'm going to do a little combination. I'm going to have my shapes, my geometry shapes, and then I'm also going to have my little picture of a girl fishing off the end of a dock. Okay, I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm going to get my clay. Once you have your chunk of clay, we're going to use a roller, and we're going to roll out a slab. Your slab wants to be about a pinky's width thick. If it's thicker than a pinky's width, there's possibilities of air pockets being stuck in the clay, and then it would explode when it dries and fired when the clay shrinks, and then the air, of course, does not shrink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully flip it every so often so it doesn't get stuck to the table. You also want to have a barrier on the table at all time. We use canvas material. You could also use just some paper if you don't have that. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to roll it out. Then I look at the thickness and I think, okay, that's pretty good, because if I go too thin, I also turned it sideways to make an even thickness. Now if I use too much pressure, like I really get down in there and push really hard, it's going to be thinner in some areas and thicker in the other. So you kind of want to make it to where it's an even thickness. Okay, this looks like it's a pretty good thickness of my finger. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a wet sponge. Okay, so here is just a sponge. I'm going to take that paper pattern that I created and I'm going to get it damp. This is going to make it stick to the clay because it comes moist. Then I'm going to set this aside, take my damp paper, and I'm going to set it onto my clay, kind of smooth it out. Okay, this is my pattern. Then I'm going to use a knife and I'm going to carefully cut it out. You want to keep your knife vertical, and notice how I didn't worry about the edges. I'm going to keep it vertical, and if you need to, turn your clay as you work through it. My knife is up, straightened up and down vertically. You don't want to have it slanted, and it's not a steak. You're not going to saw through it. So you just want to pull the knife straight up and down through the clay. If you saw it, it's going to create jagged edges. And if you have it slanted, it might make your edges slant as well. Okay, so I'm going to keep that clay for my back of my vase later on. Now what I want to do is just go through here, and you want to be gentle if you're trying to remove a shape from the inside, because I don't want to damage the handle of my clay vase. And like I said, turn it to where it's going to be easiest for you to remove the material. Now I gently hold it flat in my hand, spread my fingers a little bit, and go back over it. If it doesn't pop out easily, you just kind of want to go back through the lines and let it fall between your fingers on the back side. I'm going to come through this one as well, move that to the side. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to set that to the side for now. I'm going to take my extra clay, and this is going to be used to make the cylinder in the back of it. Okay, so I want to get all of those air pockets out of my clay, so I'm going to be careful not to drop it or throw it too hard, but I'm just banging it around to make sure I get all of those air pockets out. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cylinder. So I'm just going to squeeze it in my hands, kind of making just a fat snake cylinder. Once it's down like this, I'm going to give it a little tap down. Notice how I also like to turn my clay so it doesn't get stuck to the table. I'm going to take my roller and I'm going to measure it out. Okay. And I want this to be fairly thin. If it's too thick, it could possibly get air pockets, and then as it shrinks, the air can't escape. And then when I put it in the kiln to fire it up to 2,000 degrees for the first firing, it could crack. So don't forget to switch it occasionally so it doesn't get stuck in there. I can also turn it this way to roll it out. Now, let's investigate this real quick. So basically, it has a cylinder on the back for its support. So it has the decorative facade, meaning just the front, and the back has the cylinder. So what I want to do is create a flat edge. So in order to do that, you can use a ruler, or you can use any kind of straight edge. A paper could probably do it. But I just want to kind of take off this little section right here. So I'm going to come through here to create that flat edge. Take this and we'll recycle that clay because we don't want to be wasteful at all. Then I'm going to use my cylinder here as my mold maker. Whenever you make any mold, you have to have a release. A release is something that's inside the barrier between the actual object you're molding and the material you're using to mold. So I'm going to wrap my roller with a piece of recycled paper or something that's being reused, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to roll my clay around it. Now, I don't want to keep on rolling. If I have excess, trim it up and we'll put that back in the recycle box. Now, to seal this, we use a technique called scoring and slipping. Scoring is when you take little marks onto the edge using a fork or a tool, and it looks kind of like that. And then I'm going to do it to this side, kind of almost like a Velcro sticking together. Then I'm going to use slip. And slip is a mixture of water and clay, and it works like a glue. How it works is that the clay is going to dry slower in these areas wherever we stuck it together. So now I'm going to push those together, and then I can smear it together to create that shape. Once I have that done, I'm going to set that to the side. I'm going to go ahead and bring this piece back in. I'm going to peel off that paper, and I'm just going to throw that away. If you have some paper left on there, it's okay. It will burn out in the kiln when it is fired to about 2,000 degrees. You're going to use your pencil, and you're going to put your design back into your picture. So I'm just drawing in. Here's my little person, and she's fishing off the dock. And here's her fishing pole. And there's a little fish. And give her some hair and some legs and some water. And then you can also use the back of your pencil. Works great for making circles in your geometric design pattern that you're choosing. You can make cross hatching. Right here's hatching. Here's cross hatching. You can use your pencil tip to make dots, like a stipple. You can go in and make different patterns, squiggly lines, straight lines, zigzag lines, whatever you want to come up with. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to attach my cylinder to the back of my vase. And once again, I'm going to score, making those X lines, and score over here. Now notice how I made it flush with the bottom of it. You want it flush so that it can stand up. If you had the paper sticking out, it wouldn't be able to stand up on its own. Then you're going to use the slip again, And the slip is kind of slimy, but it works great. Remember, if you don't use the slip, it's not going to stay together when it dries. It sticks together when it's wet, but if you don't have it wet as it dries, it's going to pull apart in those areas first. Now notice how I make it flush. A common mistake is when people put the cylinder up here. You want to make sure your cylinder is down at the bottom so that it can be stuck there as well. At this point, it's very crucial to make sure you write your name in the back of the clay and of course your year. Then you're going to gently pick it up, double check, make sure it's set up. You're kind of going to give it a little bit of a curve around the cylinder so that it's going to be there. Then we're going to carry it over to the shelf. Notice I haven't taken the wood out yet. Bring it to me and I will help you set it up on the shelf, and then I will take the wood out. Now, if I forgot to take the wood out, the clay would crumble as it dries. Why? Because the clay is going to shrink slightly as the water evaporates out, and then the wood will not shrink, and then it will crack the clay. Now the paper is okay. We're going to leave that in there for a little support because it crunches down. So we can see here, this is my vase. It stands up on its own. Now all I have to do is set that to the side to wait for it to dry. At this point, once it's dried after 3 days, it's called bone dry. After it's bone dry, I put it in the kiln, and it takes about 24 hours, and I'm going to heat it up to about 2,000 degrees, slowly heating up and burning out all of the impurities. The clay will slightly shrink, burning off those materials and evaporating the water. Then what we'll have is we will have our piece ready to move to the next step. This is called bisqueware. Okay, so before it's considered bone dry, then bisqueware. Now we're going to use a glaze. A glaze is a special kind of paint. It's basically like a bunch of glass mushed together and turned into a paint. Now if you notice, this one is partially painted or glazed, and it has these red stripes. They look pink, but when they're fired, they're going to be as red as those hearts are. So it's going to change when it goes through the firing process. A glaze melts more at 1200 degrees, so it doesn't take quite as long as the original boneware firing, but it does still have to go up to about 3 times as hot as your oven at home. So this earthenware clay cannot be used in your home oven. You need a special kiln to fire it. You also need 3 layers of glaze to have a nice solid painted job. So I can't wait to see everyone's clay vases. Good luck and have fun.